I am like fairly certain that most of the people that I told I'm gonna make a video about how much I love Tony Stark were not expecting the video that I just made. I was not expecting the video that I have been making. And they're probably going to look at the length of this video and go, oh, hell no, I'm not going to watch that. That's a ridiculous amount of time to watch someone ramble about Tony Stark. Let's talk about Tony Stark. My name is Erin, and I like to ramble about things that I love. So I figured that I would take a cue from some of my other friends and just put up some videos of me rambling about things that I like. I am here today with Mr. Tony Stark and with my trusty sidekick Cotton, the teddy bear. He's not normally there, I just put him there because the wall was looking a little too blank. This is Piper, and she enjoys snuggles and laying on the furniture. So I figured that I would start this off with, well, talking about why I love Tony Stark and why you should too. I figured that just because I feel like it, ugh, we could also build this. This is a really cool Iron Man Lego helmet that my girlfriend bought me. And I figure we can build Lego and talk about Tony Stark, and it will be a grand old time. Oh, my hair is way too thick, and it makes everything at least 60 degrees hotter. So, we're gonna do that. Let's see. I have like a little stool right here in front of me, so you're not really going to be able to see me building. You're not really going to be able to see me building very well, just because I only really have the one camera right now. But I will show you my progress. Oh, this is a nice and thick book. Makes fun sounds. How exciting. 4, 3, and stickers. Yeah, stickers. Oh, these are his eyes. Yeah. His eyes are stickers. I'm sorry to disappoint anyone that was wanting them to not be. Let's see. It's kind of hard to decide which for sure this is. I think they just kind of went with the classic Mark III from the movies. Originally designed by Adi Granov for the Extremis comic in, I think, 2005. We are going to talk about Tony Stark and why I love Tony Stark and why everyone should too love Tony Stark. Back one. So I know that most people like do research for videos like this and stuff. I'm more of a fly by the seat of my pants type of person, right, Piper? So I haven't done any specific research, but I am the kind of person that once found out a way to write a 10-page paper on Tony Stark for my senior year English class because I hated the play we were reading. So I could talk about Tony Stark all day, every day, without research. So we'll see how this goes. Tony Stark was originally created by Stan Lee specifically to see if he could get people to love a character that they had no reason to. He was created kind of in the Vietnam War era, where anti-war and anti-military sentiment was really high. Stan Lee came in, like, there's a bunch of superheroes. He's wanting to create a new one, and he was like, I'm going to make this guy everything that people hate. So he made this rich boy, this rich white boy who was from money, who made his money selling weapons, who didn't really care about the cost of his actions, and who was just kind of a drunken playboy wonder. He was an alcoholic. He slept with, hundreds of women. He sold weapons. Uh, he didn't pay enough attention to what he was selling to realize that there was some sketchy stuff going on, some sketchy double dealing. And he took this character and he basically put him in a situation that would destroy most people, and instead let him rise above it. And I think what's really interesting about the character of Tony Stark, in that respect, is that he was created specifically to fill a void, kind of. Like, he was created to be something that was not portrayed in comics at the time. And Stan Lee actually said that he was actually kind of both surprised and not surprised that when Tony Stark became a major player, he was really the first character that they got a lot of fan mail about from women. And he said that it was surprising the amount of fan mail they got from women, but at the same time, he thought that because of how broken Tony was, women were just drawn to him, wanting to, like, mother him and take care of him, which is kind of an accurate reading, I must say. He was created kind of to see how popular he could make a guy that shouldn't be popular. And obviously, it worked. He became one of the major players in the Marvel Universe fairly quickly in the comics, but at the same time, I have to open a bag. He was never really popular outside comic circles until the MCU started. So, like, for the big Marvel Comics fans, he was, like, A tier, but for pretty much anyone else, he was more CD tier until the MCU started. And I think that was because while he was popular in the comics and he was obviously very important, he had a lot of stuff going on. He wasn't, I mean, obviously he's flashy, but he wasn't the kind of paragon that you so often see in the mainstream. Like, when comic characters cross over into mainstream, they're typically these paragons, like, that are unquestionably people to look up to. And you see that with a lot of the heroes that made their way more mainstream, with Spider-Man, with with Captain America, with all these people. Superman, Batman, although I don't really talk about DC much because it's personally, I just never really connected with many of the DC characters, so I just don't know much about DC, to be honest. Oops, I put this on wrong. So I just don't talk about it much. So after Tony was created, he did become popular within his own little world. Now, I think that the number one reason why people like Tony Stark, and the number one reason why I kind of connect with him, is that a lot of the time, superheroes are kind of the paragon type. They're they have the moral high ground. They are fighting for something specific. Tony wasn't like that. He definitely did not have the moral high ground a lot of the time, and he had all these struggles. And I think that, you know, a lot can be said for, like, you know, each superhero kind of has their distinct iconic villain, and Tony's is, technically speaking, I guess, the Mandarin, although I prefer Doctor Doom for that. Personally, I just think that they're a more interesting dyad, and also the Mandarin has some Yellow Peril awkwardness going on. But Tony, in a lot of ways, his most iconic counterpart, his iconic villain, is himself. He's very much his own worst enemy, and he's his own worst enemy to an extreme degree. A lot's been said about, like, a demon in the bottle, obviously, because it's probably his most famous storyline, and it's his most famous storyline for a reason. But that storyline brought his "I'm my own worst enemy" thing to the forefront. He lost everything that he had. He was at rock bottom. But he picked himself up by his bootstraps, and he got everything back. And that's kind of a recurring theme with him. He, through his own fault, hits the bottom. And like I said, like, through his own fault, he can't blame anyone else for it, and he often doesn't. He's very much a self-blame kind of guy. He'll blame himself for anything, honestly, which is kind of another reason I like him. Like, he takes the weight of the world on his shoulders. But I digress. There's a recurring theme in his storylines where he, through his own fault, sinks. And it can be for a multitude of reasons. For a long time, it was the alcohol. He became sober for a really long time. It was, in fact, a really huge deal when someone started portraying him drinking again, like it was an entire story arc. So he is, number one, his own worst enemy. He, through his own fault, loses everything. The first real time that happens is through Demon in a Bottle. Sorry, I got distracted looking for these pieces. He actually starts another company and manages to, like, work his way back up, like, blood, sweat, and tears style, to the point where he can take his company back from Stane, Obadiah Stane, who most people will know from the MCU, so I don't think I need to explain him too much. I mean, he's just Jeff Bridges. So, like, you know, he picks himself up, he figures it out, he gets back. And there are multiple times that this happens again in the comics. He screws up, he causes his own destruction, and he's able to come back from that. The other most notable point of that would be directly after Secret Invasion, when the Dark Avenger storyline happened. Tony got into a lot of trouble for kind of being a brainy know-it-all and deciding that he was better than everyone else, and that therefore he was the best person to protect the world's secrets. And then the aliens were like, hey, but if we crack Stark, then we get everything. And so that's what they did. And everyone was like, you know what, screw you, Stark. We're going to trust the Green Goblin instead, which is a story for another time. He actually became the world's most wanted criminal at that point, and was on the run for a while, wound up erasing his entire brain, which was a very interesting storyline. He has issues, and he came back from that too. He got his memory back, and it was a slow process. It involved Doctor Strange. who is another of my favorites. But that too is a story for another time. So he gets his memory back. He works his way back up into the public trust. He reforms the Avengers. He becomes a hero again. He becomes a person that people can look up to. And that kind of leads up into Civil War II, years and years later. Like, there's a few storylines between there. But in Civil War II, he does wind up, spoilers, kicking the bucket. Except not really, because no one ever really dies in comics that you can count on. So he kicks the bucket, but he leaves behind this cute little AI Tony, and AI Tony's like, I'm gonna choose a new Iron Man. And so he chooses Riri, but Victor Von Doom is like, screw that, I'm the new Iron Man. And then there's two Iron Men, but one of them is Victor Von Doom, which is probably an issue. But, as I said earlier, I really like Victor as a foil for Tony, because in many ways they are opposites, but in every other way they are the same person. And in a lot of ways, Victor is what Tony would have become if he hadn't crashed in Vietnam and met Rhodey, which is originally how him and Rhodey met. That's gotten changed up a lot over the years, to the point where in modern comics, he did not meet Rhodey when he was a prisoner of war. He met Rhodey through his military connections somehow. I don't remember exactly. I actually haven't been reading mini comics lately, so I don't remember exactly like what their full deal is. I don't think I've bought a comic book in like 2 years, which is insane. Like, I went to Free Comic Book Day, obviously, but like, although not this year. But I don't think I've like bought single issue comics in like 2 or 3 years. I still stay up to date though. He's coming along nicely. So Tony is very much, while he comes from money, he's very much a self-made man. Everything he has, he's had to fight for over and over and over because of his own issues, his own problems. He can't blame anyone else for Demon in a Bottle. He can't blame anyone else for Secret Invasion going wrong the way it did. He can't blame anyone else for the Civil War either time. He doesn't. He blames himself fully and completely, even if it does not seem like it from the outside sometimes. And he's very, very guilt-ridden over a lot of stuff that he's done. And that's not necessarily like a good thing. Like, it's not like being guilt-ridden makes life easy. It certainly doesn't. And he fights every step of the way to keep what he's got and to protect the people and places and communities that he loves. And I just find that so admirable, especially considering that, like, if his biggest villain is himself, that puts him on another level than most superheroes, because he's so flawed that you can see yourself in him far easier than you can see yourself in a lot of other heroes. Like, all of us would love to be Spider-Man, but most of us, if we got Peter Parker's powers, we would not dress up in spandex and go become a superhero. That's just not the human condition. And, like, while Tony's origin is certainly not something that we all have, like, hello, he's a sad little rich boy who builds weapons and he's a super genius. Like, so his foundation isn't something that we can relate to, but his mentality is. And I find that so invigorating about him. I just, oh no! It sets him apart from the other heroes, I think. Other reasons to love Tony Stark. There are a lot of reasons to love Tony Stark. I am one of those people that will, like, protect him until my dying day. I definitely have many, many opinions about, you know, his culpability for Civil War, his intentions behind the things he did in Civil War. Um, and a lot of those might be a little controversial. I'm fully Team Tony for that original Civil War, and I feel like there were three sides to the story. Most comics were painting Tony as a bad guy. His own comic painted it as a more three-dimensional thing. Sure, there was Cap's side, and sure, there was the government side, but then there was also Tony's side. And I think that a lot of people kind of miss that, especially because not everyone was reading the Iron Man comics. A lot of people love to hate on the Tony because they have no taste. So it's one of those things that I've taken crap for ever since it happened, to be honest. And before you ask, I also support Tony Stark in the Civil War movie because clearly he was right. Here's the thing. There are so many superheroes that do the right thing because it's what they do, and do the right thing and get all high and mighty about it. And I feel like Tony's one of the few people that hasn't ever truly gotten high and mighty about why he does the things he does. He totally gets that people aren't going to always understand why he does them, but he does them anyway because he knows that, like, he knows what his intentions are, and he's made his life, his career on futurism. There's this recurring theme in the comics of calling him the futurist, which makes it kind of extra funny that Downey was cast as him, seeing as his single musical album was called The Futurist. But a huge deal is made in the comics about how he trades on predictions for the future. And he's usually right because he's very, very smart. And I think that he's one of those people who sees the ends and not necessarily the current time. So yes, while this might feel right now, it's not right in the long game. And he's one of the few like heroes who thinks in these really long, like, plans. He's a planner. He's a chess player. So he has these, like, plans. He thinks ahead in a way that a lot of the other heroes and a lot of the other comic characters in general don't. Like, you typically only see that kind of thinking ahead with the villains, actually. And you really only see that kind of pragmatism with the villains as well. Tony is very pragmatic. He will do things that will make him unpopular because he knows that it will get him to where he needs to be. And I think that's why he clashes with Steve so much, to be honest. But Tony is one of a kind in a lot of ways, too. Like, there aren't really a lot can be said about equivalencies in the two main comic universes, how each character kind of has their equivalent in the other mythos. And I can talk a lot about who equals who as well. But Tony doesn't really have one. A lot of people say it's Bruce Wayne, but it's really not, because Bruce is, yes, he's rich. He has two personas, which Tony stopped having the two personas a while ago, but you know, he's wealthy. He owns a big company, but he's not the genius behind the company. He hires the geniuses, you know? And there's, other things too. Like, Tony is this huge tech brain in a world of, like, gods and monsters, you know? And he knows that. And I think there's something inside him that is kind of, like, bitter about that, too. Certain storylines notwithstanding, he doesn't have superpowers. He isn't anything special. He's some genius who built a suit of armor and flies around in the sky. Like, what the heck? Like, think about it for a second. Like, Tony Stark as Iron Man is like if Bill Gates went crazy and started flying around in this suit of armor, like, shooting crime bosses. Like, it's so ridiculous. It's just such a concept. Like, why is this a concept? I mean, the why is obviously Stan Lee. But it's just not the thing that makes sense for him. He could have come back from Vietnam, now Afghanistan. He could have come back from that and just continued being Tony. He could have continued doing his Tony thing. He could have drank the whole world and completely ignored the consequences of his actions, but he didn't. And he suffers from this, like, deep guilt from the fact that he ignored those things for so long. And he owns up to his own mistakes in a way that even Captain America doesn't. Like, Steve Rogers is a stubborn son of a bitch, and he will never admit that he made a mistake. Like, ever. He's not that kind of guy. Like, if he did it, then he was right. And Tony is definitely not that guy. Like, he postures about it, and he'll be like, I'm right. But, there's these huge scenes, like the one in Civil War where he's with Captain America's body, and he's like, I was wrong. And the funny thing about that scene, I think, in the end, is the fact that he wasn't. Because what he does in the aftermath of Civil War and what he does with the Avengers Initiative is what sets up the Earth to not be taken over by the Skrulls. No matter what Norman Osborn says. Don't believe people that sometimes turn into Green Goblins. Like, just don't. That's, like, a good rule of thumb. He's coming along. So I think that all of that is important as to, like, why I love Tony Stark. And I think that it's important as to why a lot of people love Tony Stark. He's his own worst enemy, which I'm sure that anyone who has suffered from depression will tell you they relate to. He's his own worst enemy, but he has these grand ideas for what the world can be. And he has this idealism that is very strange coming from a cynic like him. But he has this vision of a future that he knows he can make happen. And sometimes it feels like the entire world, including his own mind, is fighting against him, but he powers through it. And I think that's really important, especially in this day and age, to have someone to look up to who has that kind of willpower. And Tony's willpower has actually been talked about a lot in the comics, just kind of like over and over. Like, he's that guy that just refuses to quit. And that's one thing that he has in common with Steve, and I think that's the thing that keeps them friends, is that despite their disagreements, they both know that the other will fight until their death and beyond, because this is comics and no one ever really dies, to make things right. And that is the most important thing to both of them. But, like, for less, like, existential reasons to love Tony Stark, reason number, I don't know what number I'm on, so I'm gonna be, like, less existential reason number 1. He has a great sense of humor. It's not as apparent in the comics as it is in the movies. Robert Downey Jr. definitely played up the humor angle. In the comics, he's definitely more self-effacing and kind of angry with himself. What in the world? Where does this go? Alright. Okay. We are back. And I have finished bag 1. He's looking pretty good so far. I'm going to open bag 2, so... Excitement! I'm going to go ahead and open the bag of tiny pieces. Right there. I actually kind of like working on this workbench. Hey, baby. Because it's, it kind of like dips in the middle. It's not a workbench, it's a sitting bench. You sit on it. But it kind of dips in the middle where your butt goes. So, like, it keeps the pieces from, like, rolling to the floor, which I have a problem with. Like, I'm really bad at that. So, non-existential reason number 1, he has a great sense of humor. Non-existential reason number 2, he's very, very pretty. Now, like, side note, the best fan casting for Tony Stark. Like, if you wanted to know what Tony Stark looks like in real life, he does not look like Robert Downey Jr. In the comics, he's like, 6'3", bright blue eyes, like, impeccable grooming. So the real life equivalent to him in looks is definitely supermodel David Gandy. And just like, that's Tony Stark. That's what Tony Stark looks like. So yeah, he's very pretty. Although, so that's kind of like the classic comic Tony Stark. That's usually what he's drawn like. But Adi Granov, who went on to do pretty much all of the concept art, at least for the Iron Man movies, but definitely a lot of it for other stuff too. Adi Granov was in charge of the artwork when they rebooted the character with the Extremis storyline. It was like a soft reboot to kind of like bring him up to modern so that he was no longer had an origin in the Vietnam War. He drew Tony Stark to look like Tom Cruise. Which, I mean, a lot of people don't find him handsome. I think he's very handsome. I might be a little obsessed with Tom Cruise. It's kind of an inside joke with me and my girlfriend at this point. Or me and pretty much anyone that's known me a long time. Anyway, he's very handsome, whether he looks like David Gandy or Tom Cruise. Non-existential reason to love Tony Stark. Number 3, he likes babies. So, I don't have the time or energy to spend on most modern comics, especially with all of the rewriting they've been doing of Tony Stark to make him, like, more superhero-y that really just makes him less awesome. And we can talk about that another day if you really want to, because I am still up in arms over it. So, like, aside from all that, like, and I could take or leave most of that, but the thing that I love about recent comics, stuff past the Matt Fraction era, who, Matt Fraction wrote an amazing Tony Stark, like, past the Matt Fraction era, the only thing out of those comics that I really love, and it's something that's actually kind of been hinted at a lot with him. He loves kids in general. Like, he kind of makes himself Team Mom a lot of the time. He takes care of Kamala and Peter and all of the younger Avengers all the time. Like, he buys them things. He makes sure they're okay. Hell, like, he sent Riri his suit schematics so that she could be the best superhero. Like, he's very much a very mentor-y guy. Like, he believes the children are the future. But there's this panel in one of these comics where his friends are spying on him because they don't know where he is, and so they find this footage of him and he's in a hospital cuddling babies. Like, that's just what he's doing. When he can't sleep, he goes and he finds, like, an orphanage or, like, a baby ward in a hospital, and he just, like, cuddles babies. That's how much he likes kids, and I love it. It's perfect. What are we on, like, 4? He believes in true love. So, one of my first exposures to Tony as a character was actually in some of his more classic comics. Because when I started getting into comics, I got really into the more classic stuff. And one of the stories that I first really kind of connected to with Tony was one where he was kidnapped by a crime syndicate and wound up falling in love with the daughter of the leader of said crime syndicate and convincing her to help him escape. And her name was Whitney Frost. That was her adopted name. That's what most people know her by, though. Her actual name is Julieta Nefaria. He convinced her to help him escape, and in the process, they fell in love, as you do when someone kidnaps you. But the interesting thing about that love story in particular, and the thing, like, this was my first and still my truest OTP. The interesting thing about that story is that they'd actually known each other before, and then her face had gotten severely damaged in one of the, you know, she's a criminal. They do stupid stuff. Her face had gotten severely damaged. That's why she wears a mask, which is why she's known as Madam Mask. Which, we can talk about the terrible job they did adapting Madam Mask to the MCU in TV shows at a later date. So she has this really scarred face. And, you know, I'm talking about how this is, like, my OTP, you know? So I feel like I have to, like, really explain this really well. Tony is a man all about appearances. Everything about him is about appearances. He has this public persona that he puts on. He, you know, he's famous. He's seen everywhere. He's photographed everywhere. He's one of the most famous, like, outed superheroes. He's a big deal. And a lot of his big deal is this public persona and his public image. And Etta is scarred. Like, horrifically scarred. They're burn scars, and you never really truly see the scars themselves. They're just kind of like a plot. They're just kind of like a plot device. A plot device that she actually later gets rid of them. And it's like a whole big deal. Her and Victor Von Doom both like get rid of their scars, but then like pretend like they still have them, and it's kind of funny. But she is horrifically scarred by the time he meets her, for real. And she thinks that he's playing her, as anyone would, but she lets him go anyway. She helps him escape because she's fallen for him. And there's this moment where he's like, well, I bet there's quite a woman behind that mask. And she doesn't really know how to respond to that. Because she knows that her face is horrifically scarred. And eventually she tells them that they can never be together. And she takes off her mask to show him her face. And his reaction is to tell her that, I'm sorry, I'm getting really emotional about this. His reaction is to tell her, I know beauty when I see it inside and out, and kiss her. That's a paraphrase. I don't think that's exactly what he says. But he kisses her. And this in particular is important to me because Tony is a man of appearances. And he falls in love with the exact person that he's not supposed to fall in love with. Getting really emotional. He falls in love with the exact kind of person that he's not supposed to fall in love with. She's a criminal and he's a hero. She's not beautiful. She's horrifically scarred. She's from, like, the wrong side of the tracks. You know, she's from a mafia family. She's everything that he's left behind, essentially. But he can't help it. He loves her, and they become an item for a while. I don't know why I'm tearing up over this, because I talk about them all the time. They are legitimately my OTP of all OTPs. But, you know, he loves her. And their lives are what keep them apart more than anything. She actually does wind up working with the Avengers for some time, and there's all these really funny panels of them making out through their masks. Like, I don't know how that works, but it's hilarious. She works with the Avengers at some points and stuff, but eventually she goes back to her criminal ways, and that, more than anything, is why they stop seeing each other. But repeatedly, every time she pops up, she mentions him in some way. She talks about him a lot. And then there's also Tony. There's comic panels of him dreaming about her. The point in time where he gets the brain damage, like he specifically erases his brain, he backed it up, and that was an idea he got from an old flame who was Whitney, Etta. And, like, so much of what Tony is really from her, in a lot of ways. And I just feel like there's something so powerful in that she's the one he's never been able to get out of his head, and she's the exact opposite of what you'd expect from him. in so many ways. And, you know, there's even this comic in the Matt Fraction run, gorgeous, gorgeous comic, where she winds up kidnapping Pepper and trying to make him choose between them, and then an explosion winds up going off, and Pepper's next to him. He's beaten up, tied to a chair, and what he does as the explosion goes off is call out her name. And it's just, it's so powerful that despite everything, this is his soulmate, you know? And yeah, so Tony believes in true love. And that's definitely a reason to love him. Because, you know, he's got a rough go of it. The love of his life is a supervillain. That's not exactly, you know, kosher. I don't even know what number we were on because, like, I started crying. And I lost my train of thought so badly. But the next, you know, I guess that last one was a little bit existential, but the next non-existential reason to love Tony Stark is that he does not know how to deal with his emotions. He really doesn't. He copes in really weird ways. And he shows his affection in very strange ways. He shows his affection by, like, buying people things and, you know, giving them Avengers cards. And, you know, he shows his affection in very strange ways. And I think the fact that he's so emotionally inept in that way is just reassuring because I'm socially inept. Like, but if Tony Stark can be that freaking adorable and amazing while being that freaking socially inept, then I too can succeed at life. And I think, like, you've probably noticed by now that a lot of the reasons I like Tony Stark are because he makes me feel better about myself in a lot of ways. Uh-oh. He makes me feel better about myself in a lot of ways. And it's not because, like, I feel better because I'm better than him. It's because I see this guy whose problems are my problems, but exacerbated 10,000 fold. And he gets through them. And I'm like, you know, if Tony could get through this, then I can get through this smaller problem. And that's a connection that I never have really had with another comic book character, except for maybe Clint Barton, the world's most awkward person. I can't even talk about Clint Barton without laughing a lot of the time because he's just so inept at everything. I love him. Okay. Like, he's coming along. He's coming along. Yeah. Decent. So the next reason to really love Tony Stark is that he was so close to being a villain. Like, he could have been a villain so easily. But he didn't. And I think redemption's a huge part of his story arcs in general. Not only because he redeems himself, but also because he, through sheer willpower, convinces other people to redeem themselves. So yeah, he was, like, this close to being a supervillain, and he could have gone that direction. And there's many times where he's looked like he's going that direction, just because he's kind of, like, so extreme of a personality. And, you know, when you're that extreme of a personality, you kind of butt heads with the other extreme personalities, you know. Like, most of the superheroes are extreme personalities to some degree. I think the only one with a personality as extreme as Tony's, though, is probably Steve, which is another reason that they don't get along that well most of the time. Even though they're like BFFs, like they are BFFs. They're best friends. Like they're definitely friends. It's just like they're the kind of friends that are constantly arguing. So yeah, I think that's another reason to like really like him though. Like all this crap happened to him. Crap that would have made a lesser man become a supervillain. And he looked at that. He looked at that road. And he looks at that road all the time. And he says, "Not today, Tony. Today is not a day for you to become a supervillain." And he doesn't do it. And there are so many reasons for him to do it. Like, there are so many reasons for him to peel away from the Avengers and do things his way. There's so many reasons for him to start listening to other people's crap. There's so many reasons for him to stop trusting the people around him who have let him down time and time again. But he doesn't let himself go down that path. And something about that is also really inspiring. Tony Stark inspires me in a way that a lot of characters just have never been able to. And I think that that's what makes him important to me. And I think that's what makes him important to a lot of the other Tony fans that I have met over my extensive years of fangirling. Because boy oh boy do I have extensive years of fangirling. Anyone that knew me in high school, like, is just out there right now nodding and laughing about the Iron Man t-shirt and Iron Man belt buckle I used to wear to school. Like, it's this t-shirt that has all these Iron Men on it, like all the Iron Men. I still have it somewhere. I'm keep meaning to like make a pillowcase out of it or something because I can't fit in it anymore. Important update. The top of his head is on. Alright, now kind of the sides of his head are on, and we are ready for bag 3. It's the one with the nameplate! And I think kind of the most important reason to love Tony Stark is that he is the future. He represents the importance of growth and change in the technological community, and he definitely represents like the thought forms that are leading to technological revolution. And I think that in a lot of ways, what Tony does in the comics is the future of technology. I mean, not least because, like, one of the most important aspects of him is this, like, focus on artificial intelligence. Like, he's always creating it. He always has it around him. He's like, he has, like, an entire crew of AIs following him around at this point. Like, both Friday and Jocasta have bodies and follow him around. Like, he legit, like, loves AIs. And with that being such a cornerstone of modern technology, and especially, like, speculative science fiction, which is usually the precursor to, you know, science fact, with our kind of hyper focus on the areas of expertise that Tony Stark has clearly shown, namely AI, although there have been other things that he's also kind of predicted. Although, you know, there was that time that he put roller skates in his armor and was, you know, riding around on Heelys, which is funny. But in a lot of ways, Tony is kind of the real life future of technology. And especially, like, with the movies now at this point, like, you've seen, like, you know, the arm prosthesis that Robert Downey Jr. brought to that Iron Man fan. And you've seen, we've seen, like, people attempting to model things after things that they see in Iron Man. And people like really working towards it because he's someone that they idolize. And he's someone that I, in many ways, idolize. And I would love to live in the future that Tony Stark built. As long as there's less robots taking over the world, because that is not only a problem in the MCU, it is also a problem in the comics, although less of a Tony problem, more of a Hank Pym problem. The back of his helmet is done! I just have to stop and say that I just built this piece, and legit, I got such serious deja vu while building this that I had to look around my apartment to make sure I didn't have another Lego Iron Man head hanging out. Like, that's how bad it was. Okay, I had to, like, stop talking for a second because this, like, stand is, like, super fiddly. Let's see if I can fit his face on it. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He is ready to rock! He looks like a Terminator or something that's been, like, blown to pieces. Don't listen to me! I haven't watched those movies in a very long time. So I think that, like, the last thing that I really want to talk about when it comes to Tony is there is just something magical about the way all of his elements come together. And even in situations where there seems to be no way that this is going to make sense, or that this is going to get done, or that they're going to be able to get out of this, there is a way. And Tony Stark will find it. Because he is magical. And I just, like, I love him. there is just something magical about the way all of his elements come together to create who he is. There is no way that he should work. There's no way that he should be as relatable as he is, because everything about him is so extreme and so like far beyond the realm of anything most of us could ever grasp. But at the same time, something about him just like pulls you in, because yeah, you might not be a super genius with a suit of armor who likes to fight who likes to fight bad guys and, you know, invent crazy world altering technologies, but you can relate to the guy who holds himself up in his lab because he doesn't want to deal with or can't deal with one more second of human interaction. And you can identify with that guy who blames himself so entirely for everything that goes wrong that he literally can see no other way out than giving in to everything that he knows he shouldn't. And you can relate to, you know, that weird love struck 20 something who found someone that manages to complete them despite all odds. There's just so much about him that, when put together as a whole, is just like magical. And like, this is really just getting into like the personality traits about Tony that I like. Sure, I love the fantastical storytelling and the, you know, the success against overwhelming odds. And I love that part of him. And I love that part of like the comic book storytelling. But there's something that's so deeply personal about Tony Stark to me. And I think that that is really what's important. All right, bag 3 done. I think, yeah, like the last part is like literally just his faceplate. Um, so it's almost done. I'm also trying to figure out like where I have a tiny little box I can put all of the tiny leftover parts I'm gonna have in. So you know how Lego sets always give you like an extra one or two of like the really small pieces. I just find that there's something really comforting about those characters that have been with you for a really long time, and Tony is that for me. He's really like, obviously the X-Men were my kind of gateway into comics, but and you know, I obviously have my favorites out of the X-Men, but it wasn't until I started interacting with Tony and Iron Man comics that I really found that connection that has kept me going back to comics over and over. And everyone has that character that they find it with. Like, for you, it's not Tony Stark. You know, I mean, you should love Tony Stark more than you currently do. That is something that everyone should do. Everyone should love Tony Stark more than they currently do. But maybe he's not the one that speaks to you. Maybe someone else speaks to you. But I think that the important part of Tony Stark, to me, is that he speaks to an ability to overcome. Someone that you can look up to when it comes to overcoming your own faults, the people around you that don't believe in you or that let you down. You know, I think that he's important in those times because there was one point where he literally lost everything and he was wandering the streets, homeless and drunk, with nothing but the clothes on his back. But now, he is arguably the most famous superhero in comics, in universe and out. And he has soared above expectations, and he has gotten back at the people that tried to take him down. And sure, he has stumbled along the way in various horrible and extreme ways, but he picks himself up and he brushes himself off, and he gets right back to that with a veracity and focus that I certainly wish I could emulate a lot of the time. And especially for someone like me who, you know, has issues with the public and, you know, crowds and a ton of people and all of this stuff. Like, taking inspiration from someone like Tony Stark, someone who clearly has like the public persona, versus how you feel in your own heart and soul and mind, down pat. Like, I can feel like complete and utter nonsense, but that doesn't mean that I have to let everyone around me know just by the look on my face. You know, I can move past it and I can grow and become better than I was, and become better than even I thought I could be, because, you know, I might be down, but I'm not nearly as down as Tony Stark in his worst moments. So I don't have nearly as much to come back from. And honestly, I don't have the expectation on me that he does either, to be an amazing, awesome superhero guy. So anything that I come up with is gonna be good, and people are gonna be like, "Hey, you came up with something good," you know, without, you know, people remember the good things. There's so many parts of Tony's story that are important because he's down, but how many parts of his story do people remember from those times? Like, people just remember that he came back up. And I think that there's something about positivity there. I don't know, it's late. Like, people aren't going to judge you on only your worst moments. They're going to judge you on how you react to them. Whether you're able to learn from them. And if Tony Stark can go from an unrepentant, whiny, rich boy with no care for other people to one of the greatest superheroes of our time, then I can go from a little lump on a log in my room, depressed out of my head, to a functioning member of society. You know? And I think that's why he's important to me. Like, he shows me that through nothing but like hard work and willpower, I can get to somewhere better than where I currently am. And as long as I am able to hold out that hope, as long as I'm able to hold out that inspiration to reach for something beyond what I currently am, then I can get up out of bed in the morning and go to work and make my money to feed this snoring loser and maybe start buying some comics again. Who knows? Perhaps move to Canada to be with my girlfriend. There are all these things that I can do if I just put my mind to it. And that is what Tony Stark taught me. And that is what's so amazing about him and so important about him. And that's why more people than just me should appreciate the lovely man that is Tony Stark. He's so important to not only me, but to a lot of people, because he represents that ability to just become something greater. Like, and not in that, oh, I signed up for a science experiment kind of way, in that I, through sheer willpower, have done something that no one thought I could do. And I will own that until the end of my days, and that is what I will be remembered for, not the shitty stuff that I got up to while I was drunk in college. Just the badass stuff that I got up to once I had taken ownership and control of my life. And that is why Tony Stark is important. He looks so cool. Like, he's not even finished yet. I need to finish his forehead. And now, for this piece, which... Oh my god, she's almost done. Oh my gosh. Guys. 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 Guys, look at this guy. Look at him. Look at him. He's so cool. His little name. Oh my god. Look at this. It's so cool. I love him. I don't know where I'm gonna put him yet, but it's gonna be somewhere awesome. Just TBD for the moment. Because he's like, oh my god, he's so cool. Just like TBD. TBD. I don't know where he's gonna fit yet. Thank you for hanging out with me while I make him. I think that we can conclude from this that I clearly need to write scripts if I'm going to be making more videos. I mean, I at least need bullet points, I think. Bullet points would be helpful. Right, Piper? So thank you for hanging out and helping me build Iron Man, the Golden Avenger. Honestly, like, send me your Iron Man questions, or like if you want to hear more about a certain aspect of Iron Man, if you want to hear more about anything that I mentioned in this video, if you have an idea of other things that you would like to hear me talk about, I don't know, maybe we can play some Marvel Ultimate Alliance, maybe a bit. I'd have to figure out how to actually like stream that, but just you know, comment or you know, send me a message. I'm sure that most of the people watching this know how to get a hold of me in other ways. So just comment below or send me a message if you can think of something else that I should do, and maybe we'll hang out again sometime soon and I can talk a little more coherently about why I like Tony Stark or the history of Tony Stark, and maybe not cry as I mention Madame Mask next time. I just love her so much. His nameplate fell off. So, let me know what else you think would be fun on this channel, and I'll ramble about it. So, me and my new Tony say thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your week or weekend or whatever it is for you. I know that for me, my work week is just getting started, so it's going to be a long week. But it's going to be a good one. I can feel it in my bones. It's one, I have this guy now, and two, if I have something I want to ramble about, I have somewhere to put it. So I guess we, along with Piper, will see you next time. Bye! I think one of my favorite panels of all time is definitely the one where he beats Reed Richards on like 6 chessboards at once during Civil War. And like he gets up to leave and Reed's like, we haven't finished our game. And Tony's like, yes, we have, and leaves. And Reed looks back down and he's like in checkmate on all 5 boards. And it's hilarious. But anything that puts Reed Richards down is hilarious, let's be real. No shade, Reed. Actually, all the shade.